Morning. Thursday. I don't see that meeting on my calendar. Oh, there.
It's a little later in the morning.
Yeah. Somehow I didn't accept it, so it's a white. Okay.
Yeah, it's because it got moved for Sid. So
Yeah.
you can join. And then I think next week it goes back to the regular cadence. Hey, Fabian.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
I'm well. My partner baked a gigantic rhubarb streusel cheesecake. So it's going well.
So you're going to be in a food coma soon.
Yes.
If not already in one.
Yeah, no, it's still cooling, so I'm trying to restrain myself.
Gotcha. Okay. So future coma.
Future coma. I'm anticipating a loss of productivity from around 4 p.m. Okay, so I think this can be relatively short. There was a long call in the morning already with the engineering team. It's recorded. Feel free to rewatch it. The notes are below. I just thought I'd give you the sort of the short overview for efficiency. So there was some discussion on the work that, well, before I start, is that agreeable to everybody here?
What was the question? Sorry.
Are you happy with me proceeding in that fashion?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So the first point is there was some discussion. Yorick investigated the largest tables and what to do about them. And I think after some discussion, what he proposed was very similar to what we are now calling vertical application level sharding. So that's consistent with an approach that we may take after the work that we're doing right now. But I think it's also sort of highlighted again that there's more than one issue with our database, and there are some very large tables. We need to be mindful of what we do with it. I think there was also some sort of good discussion around, is sharding or application level sharding going to be the cure-all for every problem that we face with database scalability? And I think we kind of align on the fact that that's not the case, right? There are many other things that also need to happen that we are aware of, and the sort of working group database scalability will address, but that the focus of the team, right, this specific group of people, is to work on a sharding-based solution. So it's the way I phrased it is, it's not like we shouldn't do sharding and just sharding, but it's like we should attempt to do this and then many other things, to help with our scalability, right? But we should remain focused on sort of what we're being asked to do here, which is to work on sharding. We need to eliminate database level sharding as a solution. I still have to close that epic. And we discussed that on Monday. It hasn't happened yet, but that's shelved, at least for now. There was a sentiment that vertical application level sharding, so the fact of, let's say, taking all of the CI tables and putting them into a separate logical database, has overall more certainty associated with it. As in, I think the team feels confident that that is something that could be done, but that makes it a good sort of fallback solution, right? Whereas the more interesting and maybe also more beneficial approach right now is the horizontal application level sharding. We learned a lot, but if that ends up being blocked or impossible right now, then that may be the next thing to investigate that has more certainty.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Why are people stuck in this? Why are people stuck in sharding is the only solution? Like, are they folks in this group not reading what's going on in the database scalability, where we outline all these options, what I call entity or service split, which is the thing that you just mentioned, or the time decay stuff? Like, there are people working on those problems. So like this seems to be a repeating theme. I've heard this comment over the last 10 days or so that
Yeah, so my
there
impression
seems
of
to
this
be no
is that
awareness that we're working on other things. Like Janis just submitted the time decay stuff. So
I think this is
somehow,
mainly in the comms and in people joining sort of at different
Okay.
points in time, right? Of this, it's like people read this, you know, they have these concerns and questions, right? They need to be addressed, pointed to these things, and then moved on, right? But
so
I
we
think
should probably
Yuri
make
just
sure they
joined.
read the working group page so that
Yes,
they find it in writing that it's happening elsewhere. And we should also ask them to keep track of what's going on in the working group. Like these are related, but you know, some of us attend both things. I know not everybody does, and we actually don't want everybody to be in the working group meetings because that's a lot of people, but we should definitely make an effort to, or they should make an effort to keep up with what's going on.
yes. I've also had these discussions more than once, but I think it's still important to address those, but they're written down by now, right? And so it's
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. So because I was not in the APEC meeting, but we mentioned multiple times that there are two streams in this working group. One is of course clearly Sharding. The other ones are working on other proposals, the data patterns. So please help to reiterate this to the team that there are another group of people working on the other stream.
yeah, and I think there's even more concerns like the disk space on the current single database, right? And the predictions. And I think we push these concerns aside and so this is something we don't need to concern ourselves with in this specific group.
I have this theory about like why we get a lot of database stuff, because when we talk sharding, we talk sharding like on database, and like this already implies a lot of like the search space for the solution that you are looking at. It implies a lot of like database patterns and like approaches for solving this particular problem. So I think like we actively try to like move this understanding beyond the database. Database is just one of the data stores, but really it's like we should be looking at much wider scope of the problem, because we already have database team that's gonna be improving the database stuff, and like also like related to the amount of the people, where we look about a next step truly after like what we handle the single database.
And Jerry, to give some feedback, and I don't know if this is the answer, but I think it's an answer. I think part of the reason the focus may seem like it's solely on sharding right now is we really only have 2.5 people working on it.
No, I understand.
Yeah, and I think there's concurrent stuff going on, right? With the webhook logs investigation that's being done. They're also in parallel to investigating, can we shard that away to another database? They're also looking at the time decay. So there's a combination of things going, but I appreciate you saying, hey, let's look at the bigger picture and make sure we are scaling and not just looking at a single solution or single technology. So
No, and I know, but I just want them to be aware that we are looking at the bigger picture, that there is actually, you know, we put this team together to focus on sharding because, you know, or we think it is the hardest problem to solve.
Yep.
But there is, you know, the database team has been actively working on read-only and whatever. And like I've always said, and it's probably worth, I will try to attend one of the APEC meetings to remind the team that nothing's cast in stone. And so I seeded the original working group with 4 patterns that I thought would be useful to explore. We've implemented some of them. If there are more patterns, we should by all means submit them and say, hey, you know, I thought about this and here's 2 examples or however many, and off we go, right? So on the one hand, nothing's cast in stone. On the other hand, I want them to be aware that there is all this work happening. So, you know, yes, we are looking at bigger picture. Anyway.
Well, I think it cuts both ways, right? It's like when people start like onboarding into this, they start thinking about the problem space, right? And then they start like saying like, but what about this concern and that concern and this concern over here, right? And then I think the one thing is to say like, yes, this is something people think about, right? But also to say this specific group here will look at this subset, of problems, right? And there are other people doing other things. So
right. Yeah, that's
that,
my point.
right?
Or go contribute. It's just that the reading is, there seems to be a certain amount of nervousness of, are we only doing sharding? Because there is a bunch of other things we can do, and I just want them to be aware and sort of be at ease with the fact that yes, look at the 5 things we're working on, so they're not like, oh my god, here's this box, we put you in here, and anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, there's a comment from Camille as well regarding the vertical application level sharding. Would you like to vocalize that?
Yes, I think it's tricky because we all understand the horizontal is harder, vertical is easier. But also there is, I think, this kind of I guess, simplification of the problem that we try to do something that is easier and more comfortable, where horizontal is harder and less comfortable on doing. But also, I think it also kind of tries to answer some of the needs of the product development that are kind of hard to do with the vertical way. So I guess we are still in the phase of getting to this mindset of truly trying out something that is fully uncomfortable yet. And kind of, we know that we can do vertical. We know how we could do it. We know how it would work, how you would maybe even scale that. I mean, maybe it's not written in the words exactly, but I think everyone has very good perception how it would look like and what would be the consequences of running that. But not we have very little of the knowledge how it would do if we would do horizontal one. So right now I think I see this as a challenge on tuning on something that is harder to think, to use this proof of concept time to do this kind of discovery of something more complex, maybe long, maybe different in the execution. And if it really doesn't work out, we then have a fallback. I think that different set of the problems to tackle than the current one, but I guess it's also the pattern. I mean, both patterns are used pretty extensively. It really depends on the company and what data it processes. So I think my comment is kind of random, but it's kind of my perception. We kind of aim for the very complex topic right now with the proof of concept that puts, and this is also my sentiment, that puts people in a lot of uncomfortable space, because we know that it's gonna be a lot of things broken, and you need to figure out how to solve that. Where we know that there is vertical with different caveats, that it's, we know how to pull off, but we still even start with something harder to really to ensure or dismiss that this is good or bad approach to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, if we can try this and it has some benefits also for sort of things that the product may care about eventually, like regional support, and we can do that now, right? I think that will be really good. But I think we need to be mindful to not spend a super long time on it when just for the sake of it, right? If it gets clear that it's not the right way, we need to remain a bit flexible. But I agree. I'll move on. So Tong, sort of just does it is kind of my perception. So he's using the multi-database support in Rails 6.1, and this is now maybe too enthusiastically phrased, so Camille needs to correct me. He has kind of put a project already onto a different shard, but it breaks in weird ways, right? The IDs are wrong, right? All of those things, but he's kind of done a bit of this already, right? And that's quite interesting just to see, you know, to like understand what breaks. I think one of the things he found is that, you know, actually the IDs are wrong because, you know, there are now different IDs of like namespaces across shards, and that needs to be managed. But that's quite cool to see.
I think, Fabian, you are correct. I think it's also like the old commits were aligned with what I would see at this moment. It breaks also in a ways that I would kind of see. So I guess like we are at the point that is kind of, I guess, anticipated. I think like one of the why I think it's like very important point is like we actually managed to put some data on another shard in another context. Then now the question is like how we can randomly access the data from various places and like continue saving the data. And this is where like a lot of this complexity is really in this proposal. So yes, like there is gonna be a lot of things broken. IDs probably are easier to solve than the others, but I think it's pretty good milestone, or like pretty good like first iteration on top of having many database connections, like to continue figuring out aspects.
We should share that as a win for the team in the next working group, to demonstrate that, you know, there is a lot of activity, not overselling it, right? But I think showing that this is a thing that has happened. Okay, so the action items actually, like, I think the team is now fully aligned on focusing on continuing the horizontal application level sharding. Database level sharding is shelved. The vertical application level sharding is the fallback option. And so Yorick and Camille and Tong will raise more issues in the relevant epics that investigate some of these next steps for the POC, assign dates to them as they see fit, and then maybe we need a cleanup session, you know, to like get the epics in a better state at some point. But here we are. That's kind of like put like a summary in here. That's that happened in APAC, kind of.
A quick question: the vertical application sharding, does that still shard by the top level namespace?
No. So what this would do is, oh, Camille, please, you can explain better.
No, only horizontal sharding would shard by the top level namespace.
Yeah.
Vertical sharding means that like we shard by the function, we could say like CI, or the CI tables go into separate database, but it's also kind of risky on the other hand, because GitLab is like very interconnected set of the features. So it gets risky about like the concept of resiliency. For example, if let's say the shard with the CI data goes down, it's very likely that majority of the GitLab will not function as well, because we fetch statuses and data in many places from this shard. So no, to answer simply your question, no.
Thank you. So just a call.
It's more like in the Gary like vectors. It's like more 1, 1, 1, 0. When horizontal really is more like 1, 0, 1.
Okay.
That's really what we may end up, and maybe this is what happens, that we may end up in 1, 1, 1, which means that some part of the data may be vertical sharded, some part of the data may be horizontal sharded. So this would be the 1, 1, 1. But I think we now test 1, 0, 1. With vertical being 1, 1, 0 as an alternative, and pretty straightforward to achieve in the current race.
Thank you. Just a slight caution that I think what part of what Sid is looking for is the ability to scale across multiple regions or a group of customers. So we need to keep that in mind of our solution design.
Yeah, so that's why also I think this is one of the factors why what we're doing now is focused on that, right?
Yeah.
But this has uncertainty and may not be feasible ultimately. We don't know. And then another option would be what Camille described, but it has exactly those downsides where that may become really hard, right? So it's another thing to take into account.
Yeah, I understand. Cool. Yeah, it's just a backup solution at this point.
So yes, so like we test like the suggestion following seed idea. It's like it may end up that it's not feasible or like it's gonna be too complex, and then like we gonna have like the fallback, which we know that's gonna work, but it's gonna have different I guess exit like runtime details, but not gonna be top level sharding in that form.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and so in my opinion, and this may be a little too blunt, but we need to solve the database scalability problem before we're worried about features. And that's kind of a request of SIDS, right? And again, being super blunt here, but we have a wall that's in our future. And although we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner with some of the solutions we're looking into, we need to solve the scaling problem first and then be concerned about some of the other requests that are coming down. So yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like really like what we end up with, it really depends on the execution complexity, because I don't know like what we end up with. It really depends on many factors right now that we need to evaluate. And I don't really have any figures, but I think like there are so many sites really like to discover yet that we are not aware at this point.
Okay. Should we move on to some of the items that are relevant for this meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just I saw Jerry's comment on yet more definitions, and I opened an MR already that I'm going to work on. I think there are some things missing in our terminology right now, right, that we should clearly define. Among those is, you know, like what does vertical application level sharding mean? What does horizontal application sharding mean? What's table partitioning? What's vertical partitioning? I think we should just add them. My suggestion would be to like give it a try, right? And then I'll ping like Jerry for initial review on this and Camille, and then we can get that merged. But I think that would be useful for me because there's a lot of terminology that is used very specifically. I think having clear definitions helps.
And I will add to that this will become important as we try to automate things. So, you know, this is why I'm like ragingly opposed to using partition, because it means different things. And so when we're writing automation, we're going to make assumptions and we're going to name variables and we're going to do a bunch of things. And now we're going to unleash automation on multiple database clusters. So the more specific we are, and I mean, I wrote a comment somewhere about this whole, I'm going to mispronounce this, Mesefu thing of, you know, how the terminology should meet. It does become important. So I'm all in favor of being as specific as we need to and as clear as we need to. I know the industry says partitioning for a bunch of stuff, but it's like, it's going to mean different things to us or very specific things to us. So.
Yeah, no opposition from my end. I've spent a significant time of my life grouping organisms on phylogenetic trees. So I think you have support here.
Taxonomy? Is that what it's called?
Technically, not taxonomy, but we can get into that.
Sure. I'll set up a coffee chat with you.
Please do.
Thank you, Camille, for fixing the list. I was going insane trying to fix that. Anyway.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. We need to work on the terminology or glossary. It's important for this working group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I add one more comment there, but Fabian, please just check out if that makes sense. I don't know, but just for your reference. Okay, next item is mine. Actually received the staffing confirmation that both Adam and Ulrich will be able to start on May 10th. But there is another thing I'm still working on. I should have an answer today. That is a slide optimization. I mean, not a slide, actually a big optimization. So I should have a confirmation today. I'll circle back to let you know. And next one is also mine. Just a question if we want to keep running this US EMEA friendly meeting, because looks like the APAC session is quite productive for the engineers.
Yeah, so my gut feeling is today they serve different purposes on some level. It's like, I think the engineers had engineering discussions about specific things, and I think that was productive for them and fun. This one I think is more making sure that we are all aligned, right, and getting some more organizational things out of the way, right? And sometimes maybe this meeting may not be needed, and maybe engineers don't necessarily need to attend, but I agree that today we're having some important discussions here as well, and I'm happy to have like a double meeting day for Wednesdays.
Yeah, and this meeting, I mean, we're 30 minutes in, so clearly we had things to talk about. So I'd say let's keep it for now. And if there's nothing to cover, then we can cancel ad hoc. I added stuff and I put the wrong date on it below about just organizational things like making sure our POCs are 4 weeks, communicating from the working group, communicating from the prevent, making sure that the team, the actual individuals understand the expectations. I'm happy to keep posting them here as long as they're being read async, and then I'll, multimodal communication, I can put them in our Slack channel too to make sure it's covered everywhere. So, so I prefer to keep this, cancel when we can, and I've made the engineers optional on this one, and I will communicate that out again in the channel. And Jerry +1, my feedback there.
Yeah, I'm also a +1. But do we need 1 hour or just to shorten this to 30 minutes?
We can shorten, it's fine.
Okay, who owns this meeting? I think
I do.
Okay.
And then Fabian, you brought up a point about updating the scalability working group, like celebrating the work that Ulrich's doing about, or I'm sorry, is it Tong, separating out the database and showing what breaks spectacularly. Totally agree. There's some things I'd like to get more efficient on, because it seems like, and other people have been joking about this, like we have to update the status of specific things repeatedly with different groups, and this is one of them. So I've got some ideas on how we can be more efficient with some of the requests that have been out there, like the due dates and confidence level. Those are easily scriptable from individual issues. I know you put in there a preference for estimates. So you and I can sync up on that to make sure that we are much more efficient on this, because I really hate manually updating status when we can automate it. And I don't like repeating work just so we can fit a format for different meetings. So let's you and I figure out how we can be much more efficient on updating the status.
Well, I think, yeah, I agree with you. My take on this is that I am willing to shoulder the responsibility of a lot of this stuff so that the people who actually need to do the work can get on doing the work.
Yep.
And, but having fewer update meetings necessary and increasing the overall confidence that we're on track, I think we'll help with that. Yeah.
I hope that the database scalability working group will be reduced to weekly in the very near future, because I'm seeing diminishing value in the do twice a week now that we're kicked off and actually doing things. I think there was just a lot of interest up front, and that's why we have the twice a week, but I'd like to get us to once a week. Right. Jerry, with the next topic, number 6.
Yeah, I read that epic. Fabian and I are now working our way through that. But so I saw the diagram. It says 2 databases and uninstall of Omnibus to use that. Do you need production data? I believe the answer to be yes, but do you need it on both instances? Or do you need one instance with production data and then some other empty instance? These are the kinds of details I need. Also, infra is really not all that good at managing an Omnibus instance. We don't do anything on Omnibus. So we need to figure out, we can give you the database instances. That's relatively easy for us. And then we can give you a box and then you can put Omnibus and do whatever you need. So I don't know. Those are the kind of details that I think we need to work out. So we can provision database clusters. We can get to production data in one or more of those clusters. And then we can figure out how we do the rest of the stack as it relates to whatever testing you need to do. And the reason why I asked about the databases is because you said 2 instances, but if you're going to shard some portion of that, it sounds to me like we're going to work on an instance that has production data, then you're going to migrate some data to n number of shards where n is equal to 2 at least, I guess. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, no, I apologize for the lack of detail, right? It is not 100% clear to me exactly what is needed. I think that's the discussion to be had, right? So thanks for raising it. So my understanding is, and this is more from my geo background, right? It's like people need to be able to push their code into an environment where it doesn't mess up staging, right? And so a simple deployment, where I don't think people are interested in a scaled architecture of any kind, right? In terms of multiple application nodes or this kind of stuff. I think that's not so important at this point. I do think that that it will require multiple database servers, right? And I think one of them, or anything that is not the main database server, can probably be empty at the beginning because it will be used for creating new stuff, right? Or migrating things. So it will require a certain amount of control. I'm honestly, and this is maybe something for Camille, I'm not even sure if in the beginning we do need production data on that, right? Because if it is about testing out certain sort of behaviors early on, right, then maybe making up some data and moving it around on there is sufficient, right? But I think ultimately you want a subset of the production data to test it out, to make it more real, right? And I just said omnibus because that is my understanding of what these boxes would need to provide, right? If that is provisioned differently, I don't think it matters as long as people know how to get their code running on this. So that's my level of detail. I can work with the team and get more on what they require in the beginning, because I would like to keep this also, to make it simple to get this, right? Not a data access request 3 months later kind of thing. But yeah, I can work on the details of what people really need to test this out.
Gary, I think simple, not yet production data. For now, we can live with the omnibus on the same database, on the same database server with many databases to validate major aspects. I think my perception
many logical databases, you would create a separate one.
Yes, because I mean, to be honest, we don't expect to the performance to differ whether you use many or single database servers. Truly,
right.
It's not gonna be much of the difference. So this is step 1. We're just gonna be fine with omnibus or whatever else GitLab is, and just use the same Postgres instance. It's gonna be fine to validate the performance and consistency of the behavior. My perception about the production data was that at some point, at the end of the demo, I would like to get to the point that we can actually run it on the production data to show how it behaves on an actual data. it could be staging, it could be production. It doesn't really matter that much, but I think requirement is really like to have substantial amount data set, big enough.
Yeah,
so
that we can get to. Like that is actually the easiest thing for me to get to a snapshot of production.
It's gonna be fine if we just get like the database server running in the Google Cloud, secured with the address port, passport, on which we can create additional logical databases and access this main database. And we can just then run VM being able to connect to this database.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds like initially I can just get to a relatively good size box where we can deploy Omnibus. And then you can.
It's like good size, like for that, it's gonna be even like 8 gigabytes VM probably gonna be enough to connect, like to run Omnibus, because like the database server gonna be substantially bigger. But there are not gonna be a ton of heavy processing on the application side.
Right.
In the so I think really like the requirement is like get production or like substantial size of the data to really like to check how it works on the big data set, how we can move that around, what functions do break, because there is a challenge on modeling all of the features with our fixtures on the development environment. This is like the whole reason why we want to have like bigger set. And then really like Omnibus can handle everything else, like GitLab, Redis, whatever it is. It's gonna be fine. Just database instance.
Also, that sounds.
Also, like no replicas. I don't think that this is needed at this moment. I don't think that we need to test failover as well. It's not needed at this moment. We can very well
Right.
how it's gonna be
figuring out the model. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can get to a single database server with the data, and then another box where we can plop Omnibus that you point to that database server, and then I think we'll have to make sure that you can create logical databases inside this thing so that you can fake having these multiple buckets. And then the only thing, and I will try to speed this up, is we'll need to get security's permission to plot production data in this environment. And that actually also entails the question whether you want to be able to, do you need to run I guess you need to be able to log in and do all sorts of things through the UI to be able to do this. The reason why I'm saying that is because it makes it a little bit, security gets pickier if there is some way for you to hit this endpoint from your web browser. Anyway, I'll work on those details. I've already given Steve and Brent the heads up that this request was coming, so we're kind of expecting it. So I'll create an issue.
We're gonna figure out security like expectations. I think we can even leave without egress out of the VM. We may only have like some in, and maybe, I don't know, maybe we've defined like, maybe it's in through SSH or whatever. I don't know, like we can figure out a way to lock this down.
Yeah, I'll create an issue in infrastructure, and then I'll create the issue for AppSec to review this environment when it's ready. I'm not gonna give you any timelines because I can't right now, but I will in the next meeting.
This is like one challenge with that is like we're gonna run not production ready code. So this is why we may want to figure out a way to secure that and log that to very well known communication channels with this VM.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. The other thing is, I am assuming you'll want an easy way to reset this from time to time.
Yes.
Okay. So what we're doing to do that is we'll be using CFS, which allows me to clone and give you a clone, and then you can destroy it, and then you can just sort of go back and forth as you will. Since we're not testing for performance right now, that should not be like, once we're ready to be more serious about it, then we can move to the benchmarking environment and, you know, test with actual production like hardware and all that. So,
but also just to make it even more minimal, I think we do need this, but I think even now, right, if we can have the like an omnibus box and like an empty other database box, right, where there's nothing and people can just play around, is that helpful? Or
Fabian, like I think if we need that, we can just create it our own on the GCP. For example,
yeah, so if we have access to that, then
I think like we are fine with that. The really like the problem is like what Gary is describing, like accessing production data in the like in a way that we can manipulate it. This is like requires extra scrutiny, but I think we are fine for at least like 2 or 3 weeks more. So it's not super urgent at this moment.
yeah, and like I said, we're gonna start getting moving on it. So because it's us, then it's AppSec, and then they need to validate and verify, then they run tests against the environment, yada yada yada. So it takes, I would say, 2 weeks minimum. But I'll have a more detailed update and an issue associated with it next time we meet.
cool. Is that all you need, Jerry, at this moment?
I think for now, I understand what you need, and I'm pretty sure I know how to get it.
It's even better. It's more than I usually get. So
We aim to please.
Before everybody leaves, I have a good news to share. Just confirmed. So the staffing change. Dylan will join us, and we won't need Adam to join us.
is Dylan from Search?
Yes, and Camille, Craig, and I, we have talked about Dylan for a few days already.
Cool.
So, and part of the trade is Search will get a backfill headcount.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the joy of being product manager responsible for many things means that things taken away in one area get added to another, right? So it's like, and always like a mixed feeling. That's great.
And yeah, actually a lot of changes along the way because of the there is a backfill rack available. So we decided to minimize the impact. Meanwhile, Dylan will be a very good member to this team. So that's a win-win solution for everybody.
Super.
When is Chan Yu? I can get that later.
I will talk to CZ and Dylan as soon as possible, make that transition as early as possible. So do you, Camille and Craig, do you have a timeline in mind when we want Dylan to start? We can make it as fast as possible because this is in our group. I already gave CZ a heads up, so he's very supportive.
Yeah, anytime. Dylan's been somewhat involved anyway, and whatever's less disruptive for the work that he's doing, he can ramp down on that and start ramping up on what we're doing here. So
I think, John, right, from my perspective, anytime till like 19th of May is fine. So like we have people just like effectively starting on 10th of May, and even they are being engaged today with more work. So I would just assume like that Dylan can just wrap up what he's doing and just kind of slowly transition, but like joining our meetings and like keeping in sync. And I think it's going to occupy more and more of his time, even like before. Exactly what is happening right now with the Yorick.
yep.
Yeah, we can take the same approach, tapering off on the and then taper up on the sharding and start it probably right away, just starting from the joining our meetings and the working group meetings as well.
Cool.
Okay.
We have plenty of people right now.
it's good that Dylan is eager to contribute to this. So I think that's a very good win for everybody.
I mean, definitely good for sharding. I'm not sure if it's so good for search, but it's a different problem.
Yeah, that is what I meant, right? So,
Fabian,
no, but it's
for you,
great.
like Fabian, for you, it's like a 0. It's still like you're still gonna be working with Dylan, just on the different team.
Exactly. You know, it's like,
And it's also good for Tom because now both Dylan and Tom are in APAC, so they have a part.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they have somebody to talk to, you know, in the close time zones.
Sounds great. I think that's all on the agenda.
Yeah.
I have to run. I'll talk to you
Bye,
later.
Jerry.
Yep.
See ya.